Okay, well, it's a great honour to move on to our next session this afternoon. The next two speakers are luminaries in this field, and they are local. They're luminaries, very important contributions to make, but both from the Pittsburgh area. And we're going to have them give the presentations, and they're then going to have a panel discussion with us together. So to introduce our first speaker this afternoon, I'll introduce Professor Maureen O'Brien, former chair of the Theology Department and now a professor in theology. Maureen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome if you've just gotten here this afternoon. A poem by Emily Dickinson begins, "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all." That poem came to mind as I thought about this conference and about especially the afternoon speakers whom I'll be introducing both of them. We're a university dedicated to the Holy Spirit, and so faith and hope are closely associated with a confidence in the Spirit's sustaining and energizing presence. And even in the way that we symbolize the Holy Spirit, it is a thing with feathers. In these times when so much can seem hopeless, I'm energized to hear our speakers today and our speaker, whom I will introduce now, whose work is dedicated to building hope through patient and persistent efforts to foster sustainability. Dr. Aurora Sharrard is the Director of Sustainability at the University of Pittsburgh, just up the road from us here at Duquesne. She is tasked with enabling the university's first campus-wide sustainability plan. The Pitt Sustainability Plan includes 61 measurable goals, including reducing greenhouse gas emissions, incorporating sustainability into the curriculum, transparently communicating their progress, and creating a culture of sustainability at the university. And so, as you can imagine, this involves a great many different kinds of activities and policies and partnerships to address these goals. I looked at their webpage, and it's amazing. I encourage you to go and look at the webpage on the Pitt website. It's very student-friendly. It's full of opportunities for students to get involved in the projects of sustainability at the university. There's everything from how to find centers on campus for disposing of compostables, to reports on buildings at Pitt and their LEED status, to career opportunities in sustainability. It's just a treasure trove of practical ways to be involved in sustainability. Prior to joining the university, Dr. Sharrard worked at the Green Building Alliance for 11 years and served ultimately as its executive director. She led that nonprofit in advancing innovation in the built environment by empowering people to create environmentally, economically, and socially vibrant places. In her time at GBA, Dr. Sharrard co-founded the Pittsburgh 2030 District, which has over 500 buildings dedicated toward 50% reduction in energy use, water consumption, and transportation emissions by the year 2030. She's a nationally recognized green building and sustainability expert who has also provided strategic and technical support to many, many regional green building and sustainability projects. She holds a master's and a PhD in civil and environmental engineering with an emphasis in green design from Carnegie Mellon, also just up the road from us, as well as a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Tulane University. She is a LEED AP BD+C and is Living Future accredited. In her talk today, I think we can very much look forward to a visit from that thing with feathers, that thing called hope, through Dr. Sharrad's focus on sustainability via patience, persistence, and hope. Dr. Sharrard.
Okay, how many of you were here for Catherine Mo-Labita's talk earlier today? Yeah, good. Well, I hope this is a good follow-up to her question about what people are actually doing to achieve all the things that we all know and want to achieve in the world. So Dr. McGill asked me to write an abstract for this talk, which I know you all read in depth, but I really like it, so I'm going to make sure that I say it. So basically, the cliff notes here is sustainability is hard, right? It's the balance of equity, environment, and economics, and having those conversations about what really balances all of those. It's not always the answer that feels right in your heart, and it's not always the best and most perfect answer. And those answers aren't always clear, right? And sometimes sustainability is all about change, and people don't like to change. They're scared of change. They really just don't want to move. That inertia keeps them there. Sometimes they just don't care, and they're just sort of like afraid of the potential of the size of the challenge, the change itself. But that doesn't mean we can't make change. I work for change every day, and we heard from a number of students and other speakers today who do the same. But what I'm here to sort of like reinstitute today is that every step is important, right? Every conversation, every decision, every question you ask, it has the potential to make a difference, whether that's at an individual level, a home level, a organizational level, a city level, a campus level. All of those levels are really important opportunities to make change. So I've got 3 questions for us today. One is, how do we get there? How do we get to real sustainability? Is change happening fast enough? And should we continue to strive? Because sometimes this feels really frustrating, right? I mean, people are taking to the streets around the world and saying, enough is enough, we're not moving fast enough. And there are lots of people at different levels around the country who feel that need to move faster. So, how do we get there? Together with tenacity, right? And I'm going to give you a few examples of that. So you've heard a lot about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals today. There are 17 of those. These are really the global ideas, concepts, goals, key performance indicators that everybody is organizing around and saying, these are the things that we need, right? No poverty, zero hunger, gender equality, life on land, climate action, right? These 17 things are where we need to go. Earlier this week, actually, 5 Pittsburghers, actually, there's one not in this photo, were at the UN General Assembly talking about what Pittsburgh is doing for the UN SDGs. Pittsburgh Foundation, Carnegie Mellon's Provost, Pittsburgh Foundation's Executive Director, University of Pittsburgh's Provost, Chatham University's President, and Mayor Bill Peduto were all there putting Pittsburgh on this global stage saying these UN SDGs are really important to us, and here's what we're doing out in front for all 17. The city of Pittsburgh has long been out in front of this, right? Mayor Peduto went up against President Trump with the Paris Accords and said, you know what, Pittsburgh is for climate action. Pittsburgh is all about climate action. And he has a very dedicated plan that actually came out this week or last. The 3rd Climate Action Plan finally is out in the public domain. And you can see all of the goals that the city has to reach those goals, including 50% reductions in energy and water consumption, 100% renewable electricity for the city, zero waste, pension divestment. There are tons of goals and accolades and commitments that the city has made and actions that they're putting behind this. But we also know that all of our problems and challenges are linked to each other, right? We want climate action, we want good health, we want better air quality, we want cheaper energy, but these things are all linked together, and they're linked to our challenges, right? When we want better health, better infant mortality, especially for African Americans in Pittsburgh, right? These things are linked to our environmental challenges, and if we're going to solve one of them, on the way we're going to solve all of the rest. So in Pittsburgh, this is the city's greenhouse gas inventory, and this is where I've spent most of my career, is in the building industry. In cities, buildings, the built environment, are the #1 contributor to greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. Commercial buildings in Pittsburgh are half of the contributors. So that's big buildings, office buildings, multifamily, residential, not single family. And there's this gorgeous effort from the International Living Future Institute that really went out and said, this is what we can envision buildings to be, right? Building a building as beautiful as a flower and that gives back to nature just as much. Like a flower, a building can be rooted It can use, it can produce as much energy as it creates. It can harvest all of its water that falls on its properties. It cannot, put pollution into its occupants and the flora and fauna around it. These are amazing ideas that people in Pittsburgh and around the world have been implementing for some time. And the idea is not just less bad, but actually positive good. So can we create a regenerative future, a positive future, actually doing something better and giving back in many ways to the planet and our communities around us. So the International Living Future Institute and the Living Building Challenge has 23 certified living projects around the world. 2 of those are in Pittsburgh, the Phipps Center for Sustainable Landscapes and the Frick Environmental Center. If you haven't been to these buildings and you want some inspiration, you should go, right? They're amazing places, and they're both designed around educating others about how to do this just as much. And while there are full living projects all around the world, there are 30 other projects that have only done part of that. But in striving for greatness, they've fallen among the stars, right? And another 60 from ILFI alone have gotten zero energy certification. So these are great things. And there are, almost 600 registered projects pursuing these designations around the world. But these are only 600 buildings in the whole world. That's not that much. They're doing great things, but we need to do more, and we need to do more faster. So that's where the 2030 challenge comes in. So I'm going to take a drink of water. Existing buildings, like I said before, are a lot, right, in cities. 80 to 90% of greenhouse gas emissions. So in Pittsburgh, in about 2010, we realized this. We were spending a lot of time on new construction and major renovations, and we said this isn't enough. We need to get to all of the other buildings, right? The 80% of the building stock that's not being turned over. And we had a very specific ask for them. We started knocking on doors in downtown and talking to property owners, developers, and saying, will you commit to the 2030 challenge? And people are like, well, what does that mean? I don't know what I'm committing to. And we're saying, well, if you're building a new building, you want it to be carbon neutral by 2030. And we also want you to reduce your water usage 50% from baselines and transportation emissions from commuters 50% from baselines. And if you're an existing building, we want you to reduce your energy use 50% from a national baseline. People said, okay, that's interesting. I don't want to be the only one. And we said, you're not going to be the only one. We're asking everybody in downtown in a set geographic area to do this, and the numbers show that if we do this collectively in aggregate, it makes a difference, right? So it's great to do things in one building, in one university, in one school, in one home, but when everybody's doing it together and knows that they're doing it together and gets to talk to the other people who are doing it, it goes a lot faster, it feels a lot better, and we all get further. So when we launched the Pittsburgh 2030 District in 2012, it was a real success. We had a room with the mayor, the county executive, the head of the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust, all the big property owners in downtown, the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Steelers, the Sports and Exhibition Authority, Point Park University, stand up and say, we are committing to these goals together. And my favorite part about this project was they didn't know who else was going to be in the room. They didn't know who else was going to be making commitments and what they were going to be committing. So we started with the smallest property owners, and we grew in size of commitment. And nobody knew who the next person was going to be and what they were actually going to say. And it was really like a magical moment for Pittsburgh, saying, we are going to do this, and we're going to do this together. So 81 buildings, 27.8 million square feet in 2012. Today, the Pittsburgh 2030 District has 540 buildings across 4 Pittsburgh neighborhoods committed to those goals, 85 million square feet, and there are another 200 buildings in Western Pennsylvania that are also committed to these goals, right? So this is what happens when you ask a question, and you ask the right question in a bounded way to people who are looking for an answer, looking for a way to make change, and they feel like they're supported in doing it. You get a real answer and real progress. And guess what? It's not just Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was the 3rd 2030 district to launch. It is the largest in North America, but there are 22 established 2030 districts in North America, cities of all sorts of sizes, all sorts of types, all sorts of climate zones, and they really get motivation from each other and what people are doing across different cities and around the world. And it's not just an empty commitment. The 2030 district reports annually on what it's doing. There's a public aggregate report. These are the numbers for 2018. On the way to those 50% reductions, they're almost halfway there in energy, not quite all the way there in water, and their overall carbon reduction is 26%. And these numbers are important because each property owner looks at these individually and says, great, this is the aggregate number. Where am I? What contribution to this am I? What is my personal electricity usage, natural gas usage, on-site solar production contribute to this whole, and how can I help us get to that 50% reduction? And office buildings specifically are really interesting because if you look at this, let me see, ooh, I have a pointer. If you look at this last line of the approximately, I think it's like 25 or 30 office buildings over 150,000 square feet in the mix, that bottom line is all of the office buildings in Pittsburgh that have already gotten to their goal, right? So they can maintain there from now until 2030, or they can reduce a little more, or they might start buying renewables or putting solar on their roofs, or helping their peers, because you got a few up here who are really worse than average, really help them get down as well. So there's some really interesting progress being had in Pittsburgh that you don't always see on the front page of the newspaper, but people are really working on. Water's a regional challenge, and so we're making progress there, but there is a lot more to be had here, especially not just potable water, but sewage, combined sewer overflow challenges in the region, and water and energy and climate are inherently mixed. And in the Pittsburgh region, we are water rich, and we are going to be even more water abundant as the climate continues to change. So this is a real opportunity for us as a region. And then transportation is a really interesting one. And so there's some wonky things about how this is measured, but transportation and mobility is a challenge in this region, right? It's something that is very personal, and people make a transportation decision about how to get to work or school every day. And so when you say, how are you getting here? Sometimes people feel judged, and they're like, well, I live in the suburbs, and there's not a one-seat transit ride to where I want to go, but, I really want to do better. And so what we've had to do in the transportation conversation regionally is get people to understand, look, we understand that you may not be able to make a change on a regular basis, but what are you able to do, right? Are you able to work from home one day a week, one day a month? Are you able to carpool? Are you able, if you live a little bit closer, to consider, getting on the bus occasionally if you're used to driving, or maybe getting on your bike once a week, once a month, when the weather's nice, and things like that. And just getting people to understand that some of these changes are not the big, huge changes, but changes on the margins are really important. And so it also depends on where you live. And we see this for environmental impacts too. Where you live matters, right? So if you live further outside the city, in the South Hills, down the Mon Valley, you are more likely to drive. Right? If you live closer to the employment centers in the city of Pittsburgh, you're less likely to drive because you have better transit access, and maybe you work for an employer who's actually paying for you to ride transit for free. Well, free to you. But this sort of identifies opportunities where we can change the system, right? Because as a large institution at the University of Pittsburgh, we look at this and we say, okay, we know where our employees are, and we know where our students live, and we know where we need more transit service from to Oakland. So how are we going to help change the system to make that possible for people to make better decisions on a daily basis? And also, this is just a visualization of what I was saying before. Sometimes when people make decisions, it's not a decision forever, right? You don't decide to get in your car on Monday, and then you have to get in your car and drive to work every day of the week, right? You can make a different decision on Wednesday because you're coming here, and you decide you want to take the bus or something like that. I actually biked on Monday and Tuesday. I bused down here today. But these are really personal decisions, and just getting people to understand that a little bit of change helps everybody is the primary takeaway. And then it also depends on where you're going, right? And so this becomes really important when you're talking about people with different types of jobs in Pittsburgh, and especially if they work different hours. Where you're going could make it easier for you to make different decisions, right? If you're going downtown, great transit access into downtown. If you're coming to Oakland, where the University of Pittsburgh is, less transit access, right? So when you actually look at the mode splits, it becomes harder based on those different conversations. So all of this became possible because we asked the question. and said, will you commit to these goals? We will help you figure out how to measure, how to account, and aggregate you up and not shame people who are not reaching the goals, but really ensure that we can all make progress together and help people, continue to advance conversations. So, all that said, is change happening fast enough? What do you think? I see a no. Yeah, definitely not. But that doesn't mean we can't speed it up, right? So a really good example of this is the Millennium Fellowship. So at the end of last year, the University of Pittsburgh became a formal Sustainable Development Solutions Network chapter member for the U.S. chapter. Whole institution, we have all these faculty contributing to all the U.S. Sustainable Development Goals. Great movement. All of a sudden, this fall, we had 14 students pop up and say, hey, guess what? We're Millennium Fellows. And they applied on their own. They said the UN SDGs are really important to us. Each of them picked their own SDG to focus on for a project in Pittsburgh for fall. They applied to MCN and the UN Impact Foundation, got selected on their own right. And I actually took 3 of them down to meet Scott Foster from the United Nations, who was in town to launch a Pittsburgh-based Center for High Performance Building Excellence for the United Nations last week. So this was a really cool opportunity for them, but they got there by raising their hand and saying, we're interested in sustainability and global goals. And so a really interesting part of that conversation with Scott was he asked them specifically, what's your goal, right? Like, which goal is yours? What are you going to focus on? And those 3 students who met Scott with me, they were very focused on reduced inequalities and good health and well-being, which are really important goals. But it also got me thinking, what's my goal, right? If I had to pick one goal, which one would I pick? So it's climate action, right? It's probably no secret for anybody in this room that knows me. Like, climate action is this great umbrella goal that sort of you can fit a lot of things under. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today related to the question of how we're not doing enough fast enough. But the important thing to know about climate action is it's just not climate action, right? All these SDGs, they're connected, right? So good climate action gets you talking about good health and well-being, innovation in infrastructure, affordable and clean energy, both in Pittsburgh and around the world, sustainable cities, responsible consumption and production, and partnerships, because you can't do any of the goals alone. You always have to partner with someone else. And so climate action, we know that climate action is not going well around the globe. These are the annual average temperatures for Pennsylvania from 1895 to 2018 using NOAA data. If you've never seen this, it's a cool little creator called Show Your Stripes. Basically, red is bad, right? So you can visually see how temperature has changed in Pennsylvania over time, and we are getting more red more often, and that's not good for us. And so we also know that there's increasing demand for action and accountability of carbon. So these 2 pictures are actually, the one on the left is from a climate rally in 2018, and the other one is from April 2019 about Pennsylvania reviewing carbon cutting proposals for the Commonwealth. But we all know that this is what happened last week, right? Globally, people took to the streets and said climate is important, and this is a picture of that happening in Pittsburgh. That action is really important, but there are lots of ways to affect change. Some people go forth with action, advocacy, activism, philanthropy. There are like lots of different strategies for doing that, actually, like lobbying, politicians, being the change maker. I've always been one that preferred action myself, and I think action is informed by information. So some information behind where we are in climate action globally and in the US. So a lot of climate is energy. Not all of it, for sure, but a lot. And where we are globally is only 26.2% of renewables. Now, you hear a lot of push for 100% renewables, and there are a lot of back and forth discussions about that and how you get there. And there are very complicated answers that I'm not going to get into right now. But to understand where we're going, you have to understand why we use that energy. And so we use a lot of that energy globally for heating and cooling. Some for transport. So globally, about 30% of all energy is used for transportation. Only 3.3% of that is renewable right now, so that's a huge opportunity. And then power, so that's electricity. But what that actually means is a huge jobs opportunity, right? So if climate action is my goal, and I'm like, how do I make climate action better? You have to figure out how to make that argument to the people who are in decision-making places for how they're going to make change, right? So jobs numbers go a long way. Energy efficiency, conservation, buildings, transportation, renewables, all of that creates a ton of jobs and economic opportunity locally. And almost all of that is local, right? Especially when you're talking about the built environment. You cannot renovate a building in Pittsburgh if you're in China, right? Like you have to be here. So these are local jobs, local opportunities. And economy is also a very strong lever in these conversations because it has flipped very strongly in favor of a lot of the things that support stronger and faster climate action. So on the left, you'll see energy generation costs in general, the cheapest one by country in 2014. So you see coal, you know, with the longest list in 2014. Gas is following it up, and then wind was only the cheapest energy generation in Denmark, Germany, and Uruguay in 2014. And then on the right, you see that changing in 2019. Quickly, in 5 years, you saw coal is now only the cheapest energy generating technology in a handful of countries, and all of a sudden you see wind and solar becoming the cheapest way to generate energy in a country. So if you're making a decision now about creating an energy generating opportunity, and you're just a business looking at your opportunity, it doesn't matter what you care about the environment and climate action. If you're just looking at your bottom line, you're going to make a very different decision. And so these are some interesting numbers from Bloomberg, actually, just a couple weeks ago, about how fossil fuels are on their way out globally. So I want you to look at the dot on this map. And so this dot shows you when the globe is expected to surpass the 50% renewables for energy generation. The year 2037 is when the globe is expected to cross 50% renewables. That's a really big thing to be able to say, right? Like if you, I couldn't imagine saying that 5 years ago, right? But because the economic solutions are there, all of a sudden, globally, we're making different decisions because it has become easier. And the argument for making those decisions has become a lot easier, right? And so remember the dot, because it's going to come up again. Because here are 9 countries. And you can, if you're really interested in this, I recommend you pull the whole thing because there are a lot more countries that they did. And so the dot shows you what year, and the year is also in parentheses for each country shown here. These countries will broach that 50% renewables mix for themselves. Mexico, 2028. India, 2041. France, 2036. Brazil already did. Right? These are things that you don't necessarily see on the front page every day, but people have been doing this work for a long time. The US does not have a dot, right? So we have a long way to go, a long way to go. But science is with us, and the studies are there. So this is a new study from Rocky Mountain Institute this month, actually saying that if you are building a natural gas energy generation facility today, it will be a stranded asset by 2035. What that means is as an investor, you should not put your money there. That actually means if you built a cogen natural gas facility 5 years ago, you will not see the full return on your investment as an investor. So this is big news to the financial markets, right? If you want to affect climate action, you have to affect people who are investing in these facilities and really causing a lot of the challenges, right? So this is information that really has investors looking at where their money is and making very different decisions. And so this is a nerdy graph from Rocky Mountain Institute about what that looks like. So CEP is Clean Energy Plants. It's a really bad acronym, but it basically shows, you know, the levelized cost of energy to build and operate a new gas plant, you know, sort of stays steady out till 2040, but clean energy went down precipitously and will continue to go down over time. So that means, you know, a lot of the decisions that people are taking to the streets and asking people to make become a lot easier for people to start making. But we have population growth. We have increased devices that we want to charge. We have increased demands for housing and energy use writ large. And what we are building in renewables is still not getting to the full capacity of energy use that we need as a planet. So while renewables are great and sexy, we have to look at efficiency and conservation and really look at, do we need all of these things and where can we cut, right? Because we're going to have to make some hard choices moving forward. So should we continue to strive every day with new courage and creativity? So we have the solutions today that we need, but we need people to stand up and say that they will do them. So, and a lot of people around the world has. So Copenhagen is a great example of a country. So the yellow line is gross city product. So just think gross domestic product, right? They have actually decoupled their economic growth and their greenhouse gas emissions. They're one of the only cities, one of the only countries in the world that has been able to successfully do this, right? And they did it because they had governmental support and they also had resident support, right? And so this is what we need to do in the U.S. Other people around the world are showing that they can do it. The city of Pittsburgh actually has a partnership with Aarhus in Denmark, which is a smaller version of Copenhagen, to help us do this in Pittsburgh. And America hasn't given up, right? Like we are still in this fight, and there are a lot of people signing pledges and doing work behind the scenes and still trying to get to that climate action, right? We Are Still In is a big campaign, 3,800 leaders representing 287 cities, 2,200 businesses, 350 colleges, 10 tribes, 10 states, right? There are a lot of people standing up and saying, we are doing this. We are not backing down. We're continuing to make progress. We see the science. We see the numbers. We know it needs to be made, and they are making progress. And technologies and costs are there right behind us. So what you see here is the cost of residential photovoltaics, utility scale photovoltaics, wind, batteries, LED light bulbs, all dropped at least 50% since 2008, right? Some things, LEDs, have come down 100% nearly in price since 2008. So I was in the green building industry since 2007, really, and we were trying to get people to upgrade and do efficiency, and they were like, LEDs are too expensive, and then all of a sudden, whoosh, guess what? LEDs in some buildings have a less than 1 year payback. Like this is crazy approaches that people are doing all over the place, and I would say LEDs are not creative anymore. Like if you're not doing LEDs, you're just throwing your money out the window. But some of these other things are really pushing opportunities and getting people to say, oh yeah, we can do this, right? We did look at it 5 years ago, but the numbers have changed, right? And we wanted to do it then, and we still want to do it, so let's go back and check it out. Also, you see a number of cities worldwide making commitments for 100% renewable energy. These commitments are great, but you have to follow up commitments with action, right? And so this shows the number of cities that are actually getting to those goals. And what you see is a lot of cities are still below just 70% renewables for what they're actually using. And so the number one way to get to climate action is to move the market. And to move the market, you have to signal the market and actually spend your money where you say you're going to spend your money, right? Because if you say you want renewables, you need to put it out there and you need to buy renewables, right? That will help drive the market even further than pricing. And then you need to show other people and tell other people that you're doing that as well. You need to do that as soon as possible globally. And in the building industry, we know this, right? The building industry is like sort of like the sustainability leader in creating frameworks and certifications and things like that. There's a global call for 100% of all buildings being net zero carbon by 2050. That's a big goal. But the World Green Building Council, green building councils all over the world are calling for us to reach that goal. And so the question of how you do that at FIP Center for Sustainable Landscapes or Frick Environmental Center or another living building, that's an easy answer. It's like, how do you do that for this building? And how do you do that by 2050? You have to plan to do that. And you really have to think about it, and you may not be able to do it on site. So you have to look off site and say, oh, what are my sort of like climate take-back opportunities? And they may not be in the city. They may be outside of the city. So we have to get creative, and we have to think about these things, and we have to have some hard conversations. In the transportation front, this is from the World Resources Institute, the solutions that we have, they are already here, right? I mean, we can create new ones, but some of these things have been around since, 1950s even, and then all of a sudden you see big adoptions, right? Like the metro started in London in 1863, public transit. What a crazy concept. This is one of the major ways to reduce our carbon impact. Car sharing, just sort of zipped up since 1990. It depends on what you actually call car sharing versus what the U.S. is calling car sharing right now. Bus rapid transit, also the same thing. Just getting people more information and more access as well. Smart cards, the Connect card, how much easier did that make riding the bus? Using the transit app where you can actually stand on the corner and know when the bus is coming, that puts a whole different class of people on the street waiting for transit who now know, okay, it's going to take me this much time from get to here to there. I know I'm not going to be late for my meeting. Right? So you have to give people the access, the opportunity to be able to change the systems. And then the vehicles themselves, right? I didn't talk a ton about transportation, but the electrification of transportation is a huge opportunity. China alone is buying electric buses like every one off the shelf right now. If you want to buy an electric bus in the US, you're automatically on a 12 to 18 month waiting list. So the opportunity in vehicle electrification is pretty crazy. Duquesne Light in Pittsburgh right now is offering a $1,500 rebate if you buy a electric vehicle from number 1 Cochrane today, right? They want more people to buy more electric vehicles, not only because they sell electricity, but also because they're trying to green the electricity grid, and they know that they can eventually give you carbon-free energy to charge that vehicle, right? So all of this is part of that global picture of what our opportunity is and how we really get to where we all want to be. And like I said, these solutions are not new and they're not crazy. If you haven't ever heard of Project Drawdown, it's a list of the top 100 solutions to reverse global warming. It's great. You can pull it up online. You don't have to buy the book. The number one solution is not the sexy one. It's not solar panels. It's not buildings. It's actually refrigerant management. So these are all the coolants in cars and air conditioners, and actually wind turbines have a lot of refrigerants in it. So this is the number one global opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Wind turbines are second, but reducing food waste is number 3. Plant-rich diet is number 4. Tropical forests, so everything that's going on with the Amazon is really globally important. But also 6 and 7 are my favorite. Educating girls and family planning together are huge global opportunities for reversing global warming, right? Until you actually run the numbers on these things, sometimes you just don't know what you should be looking at. So a lot of this has actually motivated Pennsylvania, one of the most conservative states, to actually come out and make a whole bunch of carbon goals. If you haven't been following what the governor's been committing to, there's some pretty big goals. 80% reduction by 2050, that is a huge goal for a net exporting energy state. But we've at least got some commitments on the books there. Maybe need a little more plans to get there. But on the university front, which is what I do now, there are also a number of commitments here, right? So 440 colleges and universities in the US have made carbon neutral commitments, right? Saying what we can control as campuses, we will do that, right? We will take it down to 0 because we can, because we think it's important. Of those, it's pretty interesting. These are old numbers from 2017-18. It's only about 6 or 7 right now have gotten there. Right? But there are a number of others in progress, and sometimes having a goal helps get you there, right? And having this cohort, like with the Pittsburgh 2030 district, helps move colleges and universities there. And universities are catalysts, right? Not only are they leaders in their communities, cities take pride in their university, right? You saw the mayor, CMU, Pitt, and Chatham, and Pittsburgh Foundation at the UN, right? All talking about what they're doing because they like to talk about what's going on, right? So universities are a unique opportunity. And then through the academic opportunities, student partnership opportunities, campuses actually have an opportunity to work with cities and work with municipalities in the region to make change, and that's really important. And also, the whole point of higher education is to teach and learn and research, right? So we're actually shaping future minds about what can happen, and that's really important too, because as we create the citizens of tomorrow, we want to show that these are things that can be done, that should be done, that are not that hard, and we can do them at scale. Okay, so Pittsburgh has actually been doing this in collaboration with higher education for a long time. There's a body called the Higher Education Climate Consortium. They like to call themselves HEC. And they've been working for a long time, focused on greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So, name a higher education institution in the Pittsburgh region. They are partnered in this body to engage and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but through research, education, blah, blah, blah. The vision of this body since 2007 has actually been to see what the possibility of carbon neutrality is in the Pittsburgh region for universities. Some have made more progress than others. Chatham has long been committed to carbon neutrality, and they're the only one in the region, right? A lot of the others have been following, including Pitt. But the vision has been there, and the collaboration has been there, and that's a start. And so what this represents, actually you sort of lost the formatting here, but basically all the students at all of these universities are about 100,000 people in the region. That's a lot. Right? So if you want to make change, there's a lot of opportunities with universities. And what we see, this is global information, this is US information from the Princeton Review. Parents and students are actually looking at environmental activities of universities. And the percentage has stayed about the same for over a decade, right? So new numbers from 2014, 64% of all students looking at colleges and universities care about this information, right? So the campus is this really unique opportunity for change. So here's what we're doing at Pitt. This is what I've been doing for the past year. Just a couple examples of how we're making a difference here. And I would challenge Duquesne to come chase us. And I know there are a couple other universities here too. So this was, Burrow-Happel did Pitt's sustainability plan, and I did a survey of campus before the plan existed. And they said, what do you feel are Pitt's most pressing sustainability issues? And so green is undergrads, blue is grads, yellow is faculty. Don't ask me why more didn't take the survey, and purple is staff. And issues of concern on college campuses are waste, recycling, composting is number one. If you read Public Source, you probably read my quote this week that says, at Pitt, waste is only 0.7% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So while waste is really important from a daily decision and behavior choice, if climate action is your goal, it's not in waste, right? It's where people start. It's the gateway into sustainability, but it may not get to the end goal that you really think it will. Energy and water efficiency, climate is huge, reducing dependence on fossil fuels. But also down at the bottom, social justice, right? Sustainability is not just about environment. It's not just about resources. It's not just about money. It's about people, and we need to not forget that. So Pitt's been on a sustainability path for a long time, really strongly for about 15 years now, starting in the academic environment. But its big win was in 2018 when it published the Pitt Sustainability Plan. That plan has 15 impact areas, 61 goals. It crosses over energy, water, transportation, mobility, teaching, learning, innovation, partnerships, global outreach, food systems, health and well-being, equity and access. This is a lot of things, and it really crosses campus. And sometimes I say sustainability fits in the white space between everything else, right? Because people want to make this change, but it may not be in their job description or their primary responsibility, and sometimes they don't know how, and you have to be that connector between them. So we've been racking up the certifications and badges in this realm, because that's how the game is played. But it's not about the badge, and it's not about the certification. It's about the process for how you get there. So each of these is a process and has to engage people and ask a question. What are we doing with sustainability in courses? How many sustainability courses do we have? What departments are they in? You sort of lock down all of these questions for everything. What are we doing to support bikes? How can we do that better? And it ends up with really interesting conversations and outcomes, because if you don't ask the question, you will never get an answer. So I'm going to talk about a few here in my last 10 minutes, a few of the 61 goals. So the biggest one is, the big overarching one, is reducing greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2030. I did not say this explicitly, but the University of Pittsburgh does not have a climate neutral goal. It does say in this goal, strive toward climate neutrality, which is a good start. So where have we been over time? We are actually 22.2% below our 2008 baseline. So this is really important. And all of this progress took place before we even had a sustainability plan. So this is a lot of people working over a decade to really make considered change, which is great. What does that mean in context? We're actually on the guide slope to reach our goal. We have to follow all the other goals that we have to really get there, and we've projected it out. But this is important. We are actually, like, if you pulled that second nature slide, we would be in the top 100 universities in pursuit of climate reduction already. But, oops, I went too far. So this yellow part in the middle, that huge bar of opportunity, that's scope 2 indirect emissions. That's basically purchased electricity, right? So what that means is renewables, as we go down, become really important. And so the university announced at the end of last year, we're making a commitment to the first low-impact hydro facility to be built on the Three Rivers in 30 years. It'll be built at an existing lock and dam, Allegheny Lock and Dam number 2 at the Highland Park Bridge, just a small cut-in. Doesn't make any change. We'll produce 50,000 megawatt hours of electricity annually. That represents 25% of all the electricity Pitt uses. We can use it as a teaching, learning, research opportunity. It's less than 5 miles from campus. It creates local jobs. Like, this is a win all the way around for the university. The company that we're collaborating with has the permit for 8 more of these on the Three Rivers. This is a real local opportunity, not just for Pitt, but for lots of people. It'll also help us get our greenhouse gas emissions down pretty significantly. So waste. Waste is also important. We have a number of waste goals: reducing landfill waste 25% by 2030, expanding food waste composting to compost 50% of food waste by 2025. Students are on fire about composting, and they've been running Pitt's composting program for a long time. And so we have, signage is important. We saw the St. Michael's group say, signage, changes behavior. So we have new signage too. But what's more important than the signage is just getting participation, people understanding how the system works. We don't actually compost on campus. We have an urban university. We collect compostables, and they go to industrial composting facility in Washington County. But what we have done is we have tripled the number of buildings that we're collecting compostables at since April. And this is because students wanted it. Staff and faculty wanted it. I can't tell you how many emails I get on a weekly basis for people saying, how do I participate? I don't have compostable collection in my building yet. Where can I take it? There are people carrying stuff around campus because they don't want it to go to the landfill. Like, this is really crazy stuff. We actually started collecting coffee grounds at the 5th Avenue Starbucks in Amos Hall, not because Starbucks wanted to collect them, although Starbucks is doing all sorts of great sustainable stuff, but because there was a work injury for carrying the grounds because they were so heavy. So actually composting created a solution there and reduced injuries in a way while also diverting from the landfill. So, it's just a pretty great solution all the way around. And people love composting. And just an explanation, June and July go down because there are, nearly 30,000 fewer people on campus. So food is also really important. Like, if transportation is a really hard conversation with people, food can be even harder because food can be cultural. It can be like soul warming. It can be, so many things. But a lot of people want to make change. And the university has been committed to something called the Real Food Challenge since 2014. This is buying more local, organic, ecologically sound, humane food. And so we track that pretty seriously. Our goal is to have 25% real food across campus by 2025. And we also have a goal to serve meals that put plants at the center of the plate, and by reducing animal-derived products 25% by 2025. So that's kind of a wonky goal. The term that I've learned on college campuses is actually, sometimes when you ask people, they're like, oh, I can't be a vegetarian or a vegan. You're like, that's fine. We're just asking you to be more plant-forward. And that's a different mindset, a different term. People seem to like that term. Pitt Dining uses it all the time. World Resources Institute actually did a survey and said 39% of Americans want to be more plant forward. And once you make the decision, it becomes a little bit easier, right? It's like, getting on your bike once a week. Once you start doing it, it's easier. Once you're standing in front of the buffet, you're like, you know what? I'm not going to take 2 salami sandwiches. I'm going to take a veggie, a salami, and some salad instead. Those small decisions, they really add up. And so as an institution, we've had this real food goal for a long time, but just yesterday, we were part of 27 global signatories to something called the Cool Food Pledge with World Resources Institute. So this is no change for us. This is exactly the same goal that we had, but we're signing on globally now, saying that we're committing to 25% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from food by 2030, and that's in line with the 1.5 degrees Celsius reduction targets for the globe. So of the 26 signatories, which include IKEA, BASF, Hilton, the city of Ghent in Belgium, and University of Maryland and Harvard, all of those entities serve 800 million meals annually. Like, that's a crazy amount, right? So when I talked about making a decision with your dollar, we're making decisions with our dollars. A funny outcome from this, Nick Goodfellow, who's our sustainability coordinator and auxiliaries, long been trying to incorporate plant-forward dining into our efforts. This year at our convocation picnic, instead of serving hot dogs and hamburgers to 3,800 first-year students and their families after convocation, we served them barbecue chicken, barbecue jackfruit, and black bean burgers. And there was less food waste than there ever had been before. And people liked it. And we helped make the decisions for them without even having this commitment on the books, right? So it's just change, right? You just make the change and you be the change that you want to see in the world. So we have a lot of ways that we're trying to make change, but the one that I want to really make sure that I emphasize here, a few. Collaboration is really important. Right? You will not make change unless you are collaborating with other people. You may want to go as fast as you can, and I'm one of the most impatient people in the world sometimes, but I have learned patience, right? And sometimes you have to realize that you have to work within the system and get somebody comfortable because you need them to make change, right? And so you have to be there right there with them. Measurement is also really important. Right? You have to measure how you're doing. You have to report out on it. You have to be transparent because people want to know. Right? Not because they want to judge you, although some people will, but that's not what it's about, right? It's about being honest. And also you have to celebrate. I once had a professor who said, you know what, when you publish a paper, when you finish your dissertation, whatever it is, make sure you celebrate because those successes, while they may feel small at the time, they're actually really big. And if you don't take the time to celebrate them, you won't. Right? So you need to say, yay, we signed the Cool Food Pledge and it was super awesome. And Nick went to New York to celebrate with the World Resources Institute yesterday. Because you have to, right? These are important celebrations to make. So a couple other minor things, and then I'm almost done. Incorporate the tenets of sustainability into all student programming. So this is a big goal. We did a small progress on that this year. Every first year on campus got a sustainability bag, reusable mug, reusable bag, reusable bamboo cutlery set, choose to reuse, reusable container token, and unlimited 30-minute healthy ride bike share rides. This is a message, right? It's not just, great, you're getting jackfruit at your picnic. And our culture is reuse. We want you to participate. We're going to remove all the barriers to your participation, right? We're going to help you do this. And we're going to create a new culture on campus. We're also trying to do this for staff and faculty, right? So new programs. These are not abnormal for universities. New green office program, green labs program, green events program, green resident program, right? There's a badge for everyone. There's a standard, right? You have to meet the standard to be part of the group, but we're giving people that opportunity to enter the conversation in the way that they're comfortable. If you don't ask the question and give people a way in, they will always feel like they are out. And sustainability only succeeds with more of us, right? So we need more people making more progress, and so we need more doors for people to be able to walk through. And so this is a slide that I've actually started using lately. This is, Pitt sustainability timeline that you saw before. But 2019, the question is, what will you contribute, right? Because it's about everyone on campus, right? It's not just about me. It's not just about other Pitt sustainability staff. It's not just about the chancellor. It's about every person making a better decision. And so just a really interesting outcome of that I want to emphasize. We went through an exercise with the University Sustainability Committee earlier this year to actually define sustainability for the university, because we had never done that. This is a pretty standard definition, balancing equity, economics, and environment, so current and future generations can thrive. So the emphasis and the insertion on current generations, I think, is really important, because a lot of times in the field of sustainability, we talk about doing this for our future generations and our children, and we should stop lying to ourselves, because we're really doing it for us, right? Like, this decision is about us. Real climate change decisions are in my lifetime. I'm not even 40 yet, next month, but like, this is in my lifetime. 2050, I'll be 70, right? These are real choices. When we pitched the 2030 district, I had people tell me, no joke, we can make this commitment. I won't be here by then. Well, guess what? We're all going to be here, right? These are all of our decisions, and we're making them for us. So the questions, how do we get there? Together with tenacity. Is change happening fast enough? Definitely not. But we can all speed it up. And should we continue to strive? Every day with new courage and creativity. Thank you.